And now, marine weather around Alaska.
Welcome aboard. I'm National Weather Service meteorologist Peter Chan, and this is your Alaska Marine Weather Outlook on Saturday, July 26, 2025. We start with the state of the sea ice, and with it being now well into midsummer, where the ice will just continue to melt off further northward, but we have a lot of open water now in the Chukchi Sea, especially along the coastline, Wainwright, southward through the Bering Strait. The area now starting to see the ice melt out is along the Beaufort Sea coast, and it'll continue to thin some more in the way of open water just off of Kaktovik eastward toward the mouth there of the Mackenzie River, and the Mackenzie River does provide some of that warmer meltwater working its way with the currents westward, so we'll continue to see the ice become less dominant, or I should say even more so open water developing there in the coming next week or two. Looking though at the satellite image, very clearly we have a low pressure circulation. This is a rather broad low. It's well wound up, not especially deep, but it has a trough that extends along the outer Gulf Coast. And this feature is heading south-southeast, so it's going to pull away from the Gulf Coast and Panhandle on Sunday, so you should see a little more in the way of sun along the Gulf Coast, parts of the Panhandle. And eventually, maybe Tuesday into Wednesday, this thing's going to dip down in the North Pacific, and then some more moisture rotate around it that could clip the Panhandle then there toward midweek. Otherwise, the interior, scattering of showers, a few thunderstorms, either side of the Alaska Range, Tanana Valley's 40-mile gold country, and then around Fairbanks and northwestward up to the south slopes of the Brooks Range. This band of cloudiness is a weakening front or trough coming in off of eastern Russia, the northern Bering. That'll continue to cross the Chukchi Sea, Bering Strait, into the lower Yukon coast as we go through late this Saturday night and on Sunday. And eventually some of that moisture will be able to get all the way across into the central eastern interior by the time we get into later Monday and Tuesday. Out here, this inverted U shape is actually a pretty strong mid-upper level ridge signature. We have surface high pressure right over the Aleutians and the south central area of the Bering Sea. That high ridge will shift eastward, be over the Pribilovs on Sunday and spilling into the southwest and Alaska Peninsula as we get into Monday. So it means if you can get some sunshine in these areas, it's going to be some warmer temperatures. Dillingham this afternoon already seeing temperatures in the 70s. So the Sunday weather map shows that low pressure sliding further south into the North Pacific. Still this thermal trough into parts of the interior, and then the front coming in off the Chukchi Sea just kind of weakens, but it will have some showers and moisture that'll be able to traverse further eastward into the interior Monday into Tuesday. And then there's that dominant high pressure ridge, lower Bering Sea and the Aleutians beginning to build up into the southwest coast and Alaska Peninsula Monday afternoon. Meanwhile, that low still way down the North Pacific, but this kind of arm, this trough of low pressure will fling a little moisture back to the north. So into Tuesday, Wednesday, there could be a few more showers again across the Panhandle. And with some of that moisture crossing into the central interior, we could see a scattering of showers, some areas of rain along some of the higher terrain, and even a few thunderstorms. The best chance of a few thunderstorms on Tuesday, or Monday afternoon rather, will be the far eastern part of the interior, especially toward the Alcan border. And then here's that high right over the Pribilovs on Monday with the ridge building into the southwest coast. So marine weather conditions for Sunday, winds will be out of the southeast to east, inner channels 10 to 15 knots, waves foot or two, Lynn Canal, Stevens Passage, maybe a few feet here around Ketchikan, Metlakatla, outer coast. Southeast winds 15 to 20 knots south of Sitka, waves 6-7 feet. Winds flip around more to the northwest, northeast there from Cape Suckling down Yakutat to outside of Cross Sound, and just 10 knots, waves 6 feet. And then for Monday, for the inner channels, winds will be southeast to south, 10 to 15 knots, waves generally a couple of feet. Outer coast, generally westerly winds right around 10 miles an hour, though it could be a little stronger off of Craig and Prince of Wales Island, Dixon Entrance, because we have that low pressure trough that's going to kind of try to pull back to the north as we get along in the day on Monday. Well, areas of the northwestern Gulf, pretty quiet. We're looking at variable winds, only 10 knots within Prince William Sound outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance, and off the Kenai coast as well as lower Cook Inlet, just 10-knot variable winds with waves maybe just a couple feet. And only southerly winds at 10 knots going up along Middle and Upper Cook Inlet with waves foot or two. And on Monday, more of the same. Variable winds, 10 knots, so light variable winds all along the Gulf Coast there, Prince William Sound, outside of Hinchinbrook Entrance, Kenai Coast. Lower Cook Inlet. For Middle Upper Cook Inlet, expect a southwesterly breeze to take hold, especially in the afternoon, with waves maybe a couple feet there. On Sunday, variable winds 10 knots, Shelikof Strait, waves a couple of feet, north winds to 20 knots off of Akiak and Kodiak, kind of on the peripheral edge of that trough, so waves could be 6-7 feet there. Winds turn more west-northwest across the Alaska Peninsula, around 15 knots though. Could see some stronger gusts south of False Pass, even though at this point, yeah, that's pretty isolated compared to everywhere else. And then by Monday, winds will be generally west-northwest, 15 knots around Kodiak Island, and as we trail out along the Alaska Peninsula, winds become variable, especially north side there, North Cold Bay at 10 knots with waves just 3-4 feet. So on the Aleutians, you can see this high pressure center just north of the central Aleutians, and winds will be northwest 20 to 25 knots on Sunday around Dutch Harbor on Alaska. As we get west of Nikolsky, winds turn easterly 15 knots, and then they'll pick up as we get out toward Kiska and Shemya to 30 knots with waves out that way building 8 to 10 feet. And for Monday, notice the high pressure center shifts right over the Pribilovs. There's St. Paul. So winds will be out of the northeast there at Unalaska, and then coming across the central Aleutians, look for east-southeast winds 15 knots and generally southeast winds 20 knots west of Adak up through Shemya. Along the west coast, west wind 10 knots within Bristol Bay on Sunday, northwest wind 15 knots within Kuskokwim Bay, 3-foot waves. Pribilof still pretty, those winds will be actually falling off as we go through Sunday later in the day with that high pressure setting up right overhead, waves maybe 3-4 feet. A little bit of a gradient, 25 knot southwest winds there at St. Matthew. And then along the lower Yukon coast into Norton Sound, winds will be out of the west-southwest at 10 to 15 knots with waves 2 to 3 feet. And for Monday, a little bit more in way of push to the winds up there, Norton Sound along the lower Yukon coast and out towards St. Matthew, because gradient will be a little tighter and you're tapping into some of the westerly flow that's going to be coming into the interior. So 20 knot winds, waves 4 feet or so up there Norton Sound along the lower Yukon coast, maybe 6 feet there at St. Matthew. But the Pribilovs, the high will be slipping just east of you, variable winds 10 knots, waves just a couple feet, and then northwest to west winds 15 knots within Kuskokwim and Bristol Bays with waves again 2-3 feet. For areas, the west side of Seward Peninsula, north side of St. Lawrence, south-southwest winds 10 to 15 knots, continuing turning more southerly through the lower Chukchi Sea, waves just a few feet. And then winds will become easterly north of Point Lay, especially Wainwright, and increase easterly winds to 20 knots from Utqiagvik to Prudhoe Bay and Kaktovik, waves running 4 to maybe as high as 5 feet where there is some open water. And on Monday, kind of a mixed bag of winds expected here along the Beaufort Sea, northwest Kaktovik 10, southeast 10 out of Prudhoe Bay, but southwest at Utqiagvik with a couple of foot waves. As we drop down past the Lisburn Peninsula, southwest winds will increase upwards around 20 knots with 3 to 4 foot waves. And then west side of the Seward Peninsula on Monday, we're looking at Wales, Port Clarence, southwest winds 15 knots with 4 foot waves, and over toward Gamble, a little stronger winds to 25 knots with waves running perhaps as high as 5 or 6 feet on Monday.